I've always had a soft spot for the people that you might call the lifers in this sport. Those who attack racing as not only a passion but a profession. It's not the easiest way to pay the bills, and it never has been. But it's a special thing to discover early on exactly what you want to pursue. And what an amazing gift when it turns out that you're really good at it. Our next inductee, Ed Flemke Jr., is one of those gifted lifers. When it comes to racing, Eddie is all in. He was born into it, of course. His father, Steady Eddie Flemke, was another lifer, and surely one of the greatest drivers New England has ever produced. When this Hall of Fame became a reality in 1998, the elder Flemke was a charter inductee, and it was Eddie Jr. who gave the acceptance speech on behalf of his dad, whom we all remember so fondly. Actually, we've all been calling this guy by the wrong name for years. Technically, Eddie Jr. isn't a junior at all because he and his father had different middle names. But when you grow up in the paternal shadow cast by one of the all-time greats, and you share the same first and last names, you are destined to be called Junior forever. That's just the way it goes. It's a lot to live up to, yes, but it's also a name that today's inductee has carried with pride. This Eddie has been a little bit of everything. Many of us saw him first as a young driver of a modified coupe. Then came a short hiatus from driving while he turned wrenches in the last few seasons of his dad's career. When the younger Flemke returned to the cockpit, he raced successfully for the next 25 years. And for more than half his life, he's been designing and building race cars, quietly becoming arguably New England's most prolific modified constructor. It has been a terrific body of work made up of all these distinct phases. And to give Eddie his due, it's necessary to briefly reflect on each phase. Eddie Jr.'s driving debut came at Riverside Park in 1973, just shy of his 18th birthday. This was not the kind of silver spoon situation you see these days with some teenage racers. No, this kid started in a second-hand or maybe third-hand coupe with very little money and only the bare minimum of advice from Dad. Steady Eddie wanted the boy to learn the old school way, by trial and error. At season's end, Eddie Jr. was Riverside's Rookie of the Year. One coupe led to another, and then came a nice Capri-bodied modified, and in 1977, a really trick number 11 Plymouth Arrow that looked fast just sitting in the pits. In hindsight, it was that car that offered an early glimpse of this guy's fabricating skills. Its sister car, similar in design, built by he and his father, ended up as a low, sleek maroon and white Pinto, the Manchester Sand and Gravel number 10. That Pinto is a big part of Eddie Jr.'s story. See, it was in this period that a little at a time, he put his own racing career on hold. It was an instinctive, selfless act, a son wanting to help his father. And in September of that 1977 season, when Steady Eddie and that maroon and white Pinto won both Stafford's Labor Day 200 and the Thompson 300, right beside him in victory lane stood one very proud son. No one in those days cared about lofty titles like crew chief or chief mechanic, but either one would have fit the role Eddie Jr. was playing. And consider this, those two victories in a 3-week period would have been a high water career mark for most mechanics. In Eddie Jr.'s case, that accomplishment is overlooked, almost overlooked. It represents just a small piece in that larger body of work. Life, I suppose, is like the oval tracks we all love. Things tend to circle around. And in the mid-'80s, Eddie got back behind the wheel and his driving career really began to gel. On the NASCAR Modified Tour, Flemke Jr. won 17 times at 11 different tracks, set fast time on at least 16 occasions, and started a record 382 consecutive tour events. Although never a tour champion, he was twice a runner-up in the standings, in 2004 to Tony Hirschman, and in 2006 to Mike Stefanik. In 2002, he was voted NASCAR's most popular modified driver. There are many more feature wins on his resume, some in the SK Modifieds at Stafford, Thompson, and Waterford, and others in modified action at Riverside Park and various open competition events. And there's a handful of victories that I believe would have made his dad smile. Remember, Steady Eddie was the founding father of the Eastern Bandits, that legendary traveling gang, including Denny Zimmerman, who's here today, that in the early 60s hauled lots of trophies home from tracks south of the Mason-Dixon line. Well, Eddie Jr. has been a winner at the Motor Mile Speedway in Virginia, at North Carolina's Caraway Speedway, and at Anderson Motor Speedway in South Carolina. And much farther down I-95, in the annual World Series at New Smyrna, Florida, he beat Ted Christopher and George Kent to win a hard-fought 50-lapper. As Earlier, the original Ed Flemke cast a very long shadow, but make no mistake, his son drove out of it and staked his own place in the spotlight, putting together a career that a lot of drivers would have envied. Lastly, Eddie has played a major role in 3 different editions of the Raceworks car building business. First in the late 70s and early 80s, working alongside his father, then in the 90s and the 2000s in partnership with Reggie Ruggiero, and for the last several years on his own. The statistics from Raceworks are beyond impressive. Even though each version of Raceworks has been a low-volume operation rather than an assembly line shop, cars that Eddie designed and built have won with at least 71 different drivers and have accounted for track championships at least a dozen speedways. Among the highlights, a Cardinal 500 win at Martinsville with driver Tony Siscone, and a pair of victories in the Race of Champions at Flemington Speedway with Siscone and Billy Pouch. One other thing in connection with his commitment to this sport. Anyone who's ever stood near Eddie at any track, maybe watching a heat race, has seen this. The caution flag waves, and into the pits comes some poor guy's car, maybe with the right front suspension dangling off. The only way that guy's going to make it back out for the restart, or even for the consi, is with a lot of solid mechanical help and lots of hard work. So many times, Eddie has been the first man to reach that guy's pit, whether or not it was a customer of his. That kind of generosity of spirit doesn't get you into the Hall of Fame all by itself, but it's one of 100 things I admire about this guy. So he's been a mechanic, a driver, a car builder. In short, he's a lifer. As of today, he's also a member of the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame. And Eddie, although you joined your dad today as an inductee, this honor is yours alone. One more time, you've made it your own way. You've made your own way into your own spotlight. Come on up here and enjoy it.
Thanks, Bones. Driven 180 miles an hour, reached down, adjust the front rear sway bars, all the while being passed by A.J. Foyt at Sebring. Not break a sweat. Put a microphone and some paper in front of me, I want to throw up, I'll just tell you. But bear with me, I'm going to do my best. Okay, I would like to congratulate my fellow honorees on their induction, and I am proud and deeply humbled to be among this great group. I think it's awesome that we worked or raced with most of these year's class that I did. It's truly beyond words for me to even be mentioned among all these members of the Hall of Fame. This has been really hard for me to put into words what this means to me. Ask anyone who's been around me for the last month or so, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Being born into a racing family is an honor of its own, and growing up in one is truly an adventure, especially if you're born into the Flemke family. Being the son of Ed Flemke, you might think I always wanted to be a race car driver growing up, but truth be told, I really didn't. Never really gave it much thought. Now, how I actually started driving wasn't my idea at all. It was my childhood friend, Tony Altieri's idea. Tony and I had been friends from the age of 11 or 12. We hung out and went to the races together for about 5 years or so, and looking back now, neither of us knows whose idea it was, but we just decided we should give racing a try. One day, we were talking about it, and Tony's father overheard us and asked us if we had a car yet, because he had a modified that was about 95% done and sitting in the storage garage, and offered to sell it to us if we were interested. We asked him how much he wanted, figuring we couldn't possibly afford it, and he said, "I'll take $500 for it, motor, tires, spares, and all. Just get it out of my garage." So we jumped at this offer and bought it without any plans on what we were going to do with it or even how we were going to finish it either. We got to work on it, and with some help from our fathers and friends, managed to finish it up. Seeing the car was originally built for Riverside Park, we decided we should try racing it there. The next step was getting our license. Didn't give it much thought. Neither of us hadn't thought that far ahead, but we had to choose an owner, driver, or crew license. So we talked about it for a while, and Tony said, "How about this? My father's always been an owner, and you're the driver. How about I be the owner, and you be the driver? If it doesn't work out, we can switch." So that's what we did. And by the way, I think it turned out to be a pretty good decision. But if you don't agree, blame it on T.A. Tony. After all, it's always the motorman's fault. So off the park we went, both about 17, with little to zero knowledge of what we were doing. Starting off so young and with little knowledge, along with being the son of Ed Flemke, brought some immediate attention of some good and some not so good news. As you could imagine, I had some tough critics, especially at the beginning. I'd like to share with you a paragraph from a weekly racing paper about my first attempt, dated April 19th, 1973, 5 days after my first race. It said, Saturday evening proved two things to me. One was the fact that there are other manufacturers than Chevy, as Charlie Glazier was the victor in the 50-lap feature at Riverside with a 302 Ford power plant under his coupe. The other was that a name does not a race driver make. Eddie Flemke Jr. was behind the wheel of a 37 coupe at the park, and to be polite, all I will say is that he would much better be wiser to gain experience in a sportsman or street ranks, as he was very definite hazard on the track. Man, what a welcome to the world of racing that was. Come to think of it, this is probably why I've been so tough on the riders over the years. When my father heard about this article, knowing how much it bothered me, he took me aside and said, "Don't let what that guy wrote bother you. You're doing fine. You'll find your success, and when you do, that guy will be long gone and forgotten." Like he did so well and so often, he put things in perspective for you. On the positive side of being his son, I have been exposed to many, almost too many to count, great and successful people over the years. Each one of them are part of the man standing here today and will always be held close to my heart. Being exposed to these influences made me aware of many things. One of them being, if you want to stand out in this world, you're going to have to be willing to stand up. Stand up for what you believe and what you are trying to accomplish. I'd like to take this opportunity to mention a number of them. Bear with me. Richie and Ray Garuti, Don Moon, John Steiger, Al Lango, Bobby Judkins, Rolly Lindblad, Hop Harrington, Denny Zimmerman, Pete Hamilton, Ray Stonka, Skip Matzak, Bobby V, Bobby Cuneo, Ron Bouchard, Tony Ferrante, and Dick Barney. These individuals gave me the appetite and courage to build my own cars, which led me to build them for a living. Which brings me to my customers that put the hard-earned money and faith in me. I want to thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Looking back over the years, I'm amazed of the successes we've had. Even though we were outnumbered most of the times, we had some amazing times together, and I'm looking forward to more in the future. Speaking of being outnumbered, one year at Martinsville, Bones mentioned, Dick Barney with Tony Siscone driving had the only Raceworks car in the field, prompting someone to call our car Brand X. Later that day, as we were celebrating our win in Victory Lane, Dick Barney said with that great big smile, "How do you think they all feel now, getting their butts kicked by the Brand X car?" That was a great day for sure. To my car owners and team members, Tony Altieri, Dean and Patty Palmer, John Hummel and our guys from Team 11, Ray and Chris of RNC Auto Body, Jim Gallant, Sandra David and Roger Hill, Gary and Pat Tito, Don, Shelley, and Christy King, and the many other owners who have trusted me with their equipment, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our times together as much as I have. To all the people that have been by my side at the shops from early days of Manchester and East Hartford era, some are even here today, Jet, Doug, the Asklars, the Matigues, the Quattroparties, the Hodges, John McClure, and the Lawlers, and the later Berlin location, the Reg, Jesse, Big Tony, Margaret, George Lombardo, Roger, Big Rick, Bob, Joe, and of course Lucas. Thank you all for keeping me company and all that you've done for me. Three special women I would like to mention. Debbie Moss, you all know, my stepmom Carolyn, who is here today with us celebrating, and my sister Paula. There are no words I could put together that describes what you mean to me. My brothers and sisters Lori, Timmy, Kenny, and Christy, thank you, your love and support, and Chris, for your love and support. And Chris, I'm excited to see what the future holds for us. Thank you all for standing by my side and letting me be me. So hopefully, without getting too emotional, here we go, I would like to share this with you. At the end of last year's induction ceremony, I went to congratulate Mike Stefanik on his induction and promised to him to keep pushing to get him into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. He was very appreciative, and as usual, he turned the attention away from himself and said, "You know, you should be here today too." I said, "Thanks, Mike. I sure hope so. Maybe someday, but today is your day. We can talk about me when it's my day, but today it's yours. Unfortunately, I won't be able to have that conversation. I wish I could. along with the others who are no longer with us, especially my mother and father, my stepdad, Paul Bowen, Pete, Kenny, Jeffrey, Teddy, and Bob Potter. Just a few I wish were still with us, and I miss so much. I'm going to close with a little life lesson story I hold close to my heart that Bones mentioned earlier. The first time I stepped into a race car, my father gave me a bit of advice. I'd like to share that with you, especially the young people here. After 2 quick sessions of maybe 5 or 6 laps, my father walked out to the inner edge of the infield and called me back in. Imagine that happening today. Okay. I pulled in and he walked over and sat on the driver's side nerve bar, reached in, grabbed my left arm, which by the way, told me years later that he did that to get the sense of other drivers' stress level he was racing with. As he held my arm, he said, "I've got to go now." He looked straight at me and said, "Just remember one thing, kid. The only one you have to impress is yourself." He patted me on the arm one more time and walked away. I'm proud to say I have used these words many times over the years with many young drivers, most recently with a young lady, Nikki Shambrello. So after 46 years of living and sharing this advice, I think I can finally say, well, Dad, I'm impressed, but I'm not done yet. Thank you once again to the members of NEAR, everyone who makes this event possible, and everyone who believed in me. It's truly an honor beyond these words. Thank you.